to another riveting episode of Awkward Insurance. I'm not really sure, actually, if they're all riveting, but every once in a while we do strike gold, and I have high hopes for today. We are still oddly or awkwardly exploring various job roles in and adjacent to the risk and insurance industry, and I think the role we're exploring today might be one that drives all insurance agents to start drinking. There was one thing. I don't have my fabulous co-host here with me today. There was one thing in a previous life. I was in the medical field, and I think the one thing they said in terms of nursing is if you don't smoke, you will by the end of your career. I think something similar can be said for a career in insurance is if you don't drink, you will by the end of your career. And I think excuse me, property inspections or the inspectors themselves may be one of the catalysts for that. So we're going to explore that role today, but I think I just heard a collective groan. I know I can hear Curtis laughing in the background. So let me go ahead and introduce our guest for today. It is none other than Curtis Goldsborough. I think I called you Goldberg when I saw you in Vegas.
You would not be the first person. Yeah, I get that a lot.
And that's just because it's a TV show that I really like, The Goldbergs.
There you go. Yep.
None other than loss ratio himself. Curtis, welcome so much to Awkward Insurance.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this, I think, since ITC. So,
have you now? Did you know who Awkward was before ITC?
I absolutely did. 100%.
That's a lie.
That is not a lie.
The lie detector test said that was a lie. Man, you get around. Is the conference circuit just your jive? Is that where you find yourself, is in the conference circuit?
Yeah, a fair amount. Although I honestly don't. I mean, there are a lot of people that get around way more than I do. You know, I'm certainly not at every single insurance conference because, I'm wearing a lot of hats. And
let me give you a little bit of an intro because you are way more than just loss ratio. Curtis is the president of the National Insurance Inspection Services Company, a nationwide underwriting inspection firm that focuses on self-inspection technology for personal lines underwriting. He also creates, some tiny little videos, content stuff online that you've probably never seen. But most of them are kind of rap based, and I know the insurance industry is kind of old, but it's on LinkedIn, and he says it's to help entertain, educate, and inspire insurance professionals around the globe. We're going to get into all of that probably towards the end because I just really don't want to focus on that. I feel like that's probably a great focus of what you do most of the time. I want to focus on what's inside your brain. Did you bring your brain today?
This may be a very short episode.
Okay. So thanks so much for being here. I have a question. Do you ever watch those, the videos on social media of like the inspectors that go around, particularly new construction, and they're like circling things and going, nope, yep, nope. And all of it. Do you ever watch those?
I have seen, yes, I've seen quite a few of them. They're not like on my regular playlist, but yeah.
Do you view them in the same way that they do, or are you just like, nope, not writing this risk?
Yeah, I mean,
the roof ones get me every time, like the rafters, not the roof coverings, the rafters, and when they're not tied to get, oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's no shortage of of scary stuff out there in that regard, and I think it's interesting. We process so much data, tens of thousands of inspections every month. And of course I'm not in the trenches like I used to be a lot of years ago. I did a lot of inspections myself. And
literal trenches. You were in literal trenches.
Yes. In quite literally in trenches. And, I've been, bit by dogs and chased off properties and all those good things.
File a claim.
But now, today I still look at a lot of inspections because it's fascinating to me. It's very entertaining, to see the types of things like you mentioned. And
what's the most fascinating thing?
Yeah. And it is kind of the classic, right? Just when you think you've seen it all, humanity wins, right? Like the ingenuity of humans, never ceases to amaze, and it's astounding. We see the good, the bad, and the ugly every single day, and it's nothing short of fascinating.
So is the most fascinating thing when you come across something that is a DIY and you're like, oh, that's not how that works, but that's clever.
Yes, absolutely, right?
What's a good
Absolutely.
DIY you've come across on some inspection?
And we have, I have a folder on my desktop of inspection photos. Well, I'll just say it. The title of the folder is WTF. And it's a collection of the most absurd things that we've come across in the last few years anyway. And it is, the DIY stuff will just blow your mind. We had one, this is a couple months ago, that came through, but someone had apparently, they wanted to add like an outdoor lighting above their garage doors, right? And so there is literally, I can send you the photo, there is literally this desk lamp, like an interior desk lamp, right, that is screwed into the siding on the wall. And then obviously this is not weatherproof in any way, shape, or form, right? And so in order to weatherproof this desk lamp light fixture, they screwed a paint tray, like a roller tray for paint, like a plastic paint tray. Okay. They screwed that as like a roof, this little roof over top to protect it's just
that's phenomenal.
Absolutely phenomenal. Yes.
Okay.
and obviously not an underwriting concern at all. So
I mean,
that passes with flying colors.
Listen, if they're doing stuff like that, what are they doing about their major renovations? Oh my gosh. So we're gonna get into like how you started in property claims because I think that's one thing that we love to explore when we're in our season of job roles. But knowing what you know about property inspections and maybe even what you've seen on social media and new construction and all that, would you rather, we're going to have a little would you rather for just a second, would you rather own a brand new home or a home that was built 100 years ago?
That's actually a really tough question. I'd have to go with the brand new one.
Why?
I mean, less stuff to go wrong, hopefully, less maintenance, but it certainly often doesn't have the cool factor.
It doesn't. You're right. It doesn't have the ghosts that come along with it. I agree. The other thing that I think of, though, is that if this home has been here for 100 years, then ain't no tornado wiping it out. Being from Arkansas, which is where I'm from, we're in Tornado Alley. So when I look at like if we're going to buy a new house, where are we going to buy a house from? Well, I want to know where the oldest neighborhoods are because a tornado hasn't been through there. And then we're probably standing a good chance that tornadoes just don't come this way because there are certain communities that have been taken out several times by tornadoes here in Arkansas, and how they're still standing, I have no idea. But have you seen the videos of like wood from 100 years ago? Because we were just getting into the age of cutting down all the trees and everything, and now we're into the wood milling process where we're growing trees just to cut them down, that it's not as compact, there aren't as many rings and all that kind of stuff. I feel like they don't make them like they used to.
They absolutely don't. I was literally, it's kind of funny we're talking about this. 2 days ago, I was in the basement of my father-in-law's childhood home, which is a 100-plus-year-old home here in northern Michigan, and just looking at the timbers that they used, like the rough cut timbers that were used, for the floor trusses and the floor joists and all of that. And it's fascinating. And it's like, these things are probably going to last forever. They're just as strong as they were the day they were set in place 100 years ago. So it's pretty fascinating.
Is that what you do when you go places? You start inspecting by accident?
Very much so. I mean, you can't. What it's like, right? I mean, it's kind of no different for insurance agents, or I think any industry. If you're in the property side, right? Like, you don't look at properties the same, right? You always have some kind of lens when you're looking at anything, right? And so my wife, she jokes with me all the time, but we are starting to travel more and more and do a lot of camping, and we're trying to get to as many national parks as we can around the country. And I anytime that we're driving, through a residential neighborhood or past houses, I'm like, oh, those steps don't have a handrail, right? And there's a broken window and there's some missing shingles, right? And
Okay, let's talk about the handrail for a second. I was driving down the road just a day or two ago in an older neighborhood, and I looked to the left, and there's seriously, this is the front yard has this sloped, I guess, front yard. It just goes up and kind of levels off and then goes up a little bit more. Not very much, but there's one or two stairs.
Yep.
There are they looked brand new. They were wooden handrails that it looked like somebody had, dug a hole, put up I don't know, a 4x4 probably, or maybe a 6x6. I couldn't really tell from how fast I was. I wasn't driving fast. I was driving anyway.
Right. Of course.
The first thing I thought of was, oh my God, insurance is ridiculous if they made them put rails on these two tiny little steps just to get up this tiny little ramp of a yard. And it was still so level with the ground. Where are you falling if you fall off those steps anyways?
It is highly unlikely that those handrails were installed voluntarily, right?
That's what it looked like. That is exactly what it looked like. I'm like, oh, those were an afterthought for sure. What is the deal with putting rails on one or two steps?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's fascinating to me how, we obviously, work with dozens of carriers, around the country, and, everyone from the largest tier 1 carriers and all the way down the food chain to, smaller single state mutuals. And, the variance, the differences in underwriting guidelines from carrier to carrier have always been very, very fascinating to me, because I often think the loss experience can't be that drastically different between them, right? Certainly, I think in some categories of very specific risks, right? Depending on, where you're at in the country, right? There might be an expectation of, higher claims frequency for some specific scenario, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of things where it's look, the loss experience has to be the same, right? And handrails is an example of that, but you think about something think about trampolines, right? Which is kind of one of my favorites, and I post about that a fair amount, right? But trampolines are obviously a liability hazard, right? There's boatloads of data out there on all of the injuries that happen with trampolines. But even with that, we work with some carriers and they have zero concern, no underwriting guidelines around trampolines, right? They'll accept them, no problem. Does it have safety netting or not? They don't care, right? They're not concerned about trampolines. And then, of course, I think the majority of carriers probably today have some kind of, guidelines built around that. And some of them just flat out don't accept trampolines, period, right? It is, automatically ineligible. Others require safety netting, and if it does have safety netting, then they're okay with it. Others might surcharge for it, right? But at the end of the day, it's I can't imagine that they have any different loss history, right? People jump on trampolines and people get hurt on trampolines, and it doesn't matter if you're in California or Michigan or whatever, right? So anyway, but yeah, back to your point, what is up with 1 and 2 step handrail requirements? It's, it's, probably, I mean, insurance is risk averse, right? And, is 1 step a risk? I get on some level, okay. Right?
On
everything is a risk.
Everything is a risk.
I think that it is, again, I keep using the word, but it is fascinating to me, again, how just the variance in underwriting guidelines and practices and,
that's a good point. I mean, especially as an independent agent and how many markets we have access to. A no in one area, excuse me, can be a yes in another area. So when one door closes, another door opens, which is why I like to say, especially yesterday, when I was going through auto claims, when an insured gets upset about like what's going to happen if this wreck that I've just had. Okay, A, you haven't even made it off the stretcher yet. So we'll figure out the insurance part later. Let's contact loved ones and, whatever. But B, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, because there's another carrier that'll probably accept this. And if not today, 6 months from now, that market appetite might change and I might have solutions that I don't have today and I won't be able to advise on. So we'll always cross that bridge when we get there, which is what it sounds like with the various differences in property underwriting, which I experience as well. You just, everybody can't go into one bucket. So everybody's got to have their niche and be able to handle it in different ways. All right, let's talk about being a property inspector. I don't know a lot about Curtis, but it sounds like that's how you got your start in insurance. Is that right?
That's not actually how I got my start. I actually started as an agent. So I was on the distribution side. I was a captive agent with Farm Bureau here in Michigan. So that's where I cut my teeth. So I was licensed P&C and did some life and health as well. And so I wrote a ton of business, lots of personal lines, a little bit of commercial. I kind of had a little niche in Northern Michigan, writing churches and houses of worship. That was kind of my thing. Pretty much all of my commercial experience was in that realm. But yeah, I did that for 6 years. And to your point that you mentioned earlier, I experienced all of the emotions that come with underwriting inspections. I absolutely hated them.
We all do. Oh my God.
Inspections they were the absolute bane of my existence.
The minute you can hit submit and it doesn't trigger for an inspection.
Yes.
Break open the champagne that's been sitting in the refrigerator. Especially right now.
It is, an absolute, celebratory moment for sure. And I do think that, it's interesting to me how, back when I was an agent, we were certainly in a, would have been considered in a, a very soft market, right? And underwriting was not nearly as stringent. And there were not nearly as many inspections taking place, as there are today. So I quite frankly, I can't even imagine. I can't imagine, because now I'm on the other side of it. And so I see it, from the inspection vendor side. But it has only, in all seriousness, right? It has absolutely gotten worse over time. And we saw this specifically through COVID. And I think there were a lot of different factors driving that, but a lot of that was, quite frankly, societal, right? Like social factors and whatnot. But we certainly through COVID, we saw, obviously the inspection world changed dramatically through COVID. But for the inspections that were taking place, and even, kind of coming out of COVID, there's even less and less love from consumers for
through COVID. They kind of laid off on inspections for a hot second, right? Because, everything shut down for a little bit, but
yeah. And that was really what, that was what drove, such, this massive self-inspection adoption, right? Like COVID forced carriers into a self-inspection model, which was very good for us, right? And it really, really kind of helped accelerate our growth in that regard. Yeah, it was absolutely a silver lining for us. But you are absolutely right. Certainly interior inspections stopped 100%, right? Like there were no interior inspections happening through the COVID years. There was still a fair amount of
not the golden
kind of these
years,
cursory
the
exterior only stuff. But yeah, absolutely, a much heightened sensitivity, through COVID to strangers coming onto my property or in my house, and poking around and taking pictures of my stuff.
Yeah. So that was always a pain point, I guess, from my side as an insurance professional, was having to tell somebody that their property was going to be inspected. Nobody feels good about anything being inspected ever, whether it's your property or your body or
Yep.
TSA. Nobody likes an inspection, right? So telling them that they're going to have an inspection, but then oftentimes those inspectors don't even call to schedule anything. Sometimes they do, especially if they're high value properties, or high net worth properties. They'll come in and schedule because they've got to come inside. But the external I can tell you like a handful of times I've had people, because we live out in the country or we've got some country folks, and you kind of have to, you actually have to drive up somebody's there. We have driveways. They're not just,
Yep.
a place to park your car. You actually got to drive up to somebody's house once you pass their property gate. And people
Yeah.
will come outside with their firearms and, what are you doing on my property, kind of thing. You're like, oh no, I told you. we just want to take it. You're not taking pictures of my, it's a whole dang thing. Do people feel better about taking pictures of their property and sending them in, or do they still feel like that's intrusive?
I mean, there is always, there's always going to be a segment of people, right, that, they're not going to like it either way, right? They certainly don't want a person coming on their property and taking photos, and they don't want to do it themselves either, right? If they're more concerned from a privacy perspective, like, either way, they're going to consider that to be a massive intrusion on their privacy, right? So, there's always going to be that segment of people. However, we have really good data now and feedback from, over 500,000, completed self-inspections and 500,000 policyholders.
Oh, wow.
And a very, very strong majority of them, say that they much prefer self-inspection versus having a stranger on their property. Right. So,
Okay.
I think that really helped kind of solidify in our minds that, this is the way that the industry needs to go. And it is the way that it is shifting very rapidly now. And I could talk a lot more about that, but yeah.
So now, when we put clients into a POS, it asks what their occupation is. So if they're a photographer, automatic goes over to self-inspection because they're going to have the best quality photos and discount.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's funny, we joke about that, but the reality is technology has come so far, right? I mean, everybody knows this, and we see this. You'll get a kick out of this. This is kind of a funny, thing that we see all the time, right? But when you have a policyholder or an inspector for that matter, right? It doesn't matter. But if you're getting interior photos of a home, right? And you are asking for photos of the bathrooms in the home, which,
oh dear,
pretty much all of our carrier clients want photos of the bathroom, right? And they're concerned about, the plumbing under the sinks and the water supply lines to the toilets, right? And they want to see steel braided water supply lines versus the old plastic lines, right? And
okay.
Concerned about these non-weather water losses. And
clean your toilets, folks, before you take the picture. PSA.
Anyway, what we see that is interesting is we see a lot of people in bathroom mirrors, right?
Oh.
And so what that has unintentionally taught us is we start to see demographic information, because I can see that, that's a 20-something guy, right? And he's holding up his iPhone 16 and, taking a photo of his bathroom, right? But it has been shocking to me to see, like, there is no difference across demographics, right? We see just as many, younger demographics completing self-inspections, and as we do the older generation, right? And I literally, I can show you photos of, I mean, say it nicely, right? But people who have to be over 80 years old, and, grandpa's doing his self-inspection. So anyway, the point being, right, like, technology has come so far, and, like, it doesn't, across generations and demographics, like, people are so used to taking photos with their smartphone, right? And smartphones, they take great photos, and they have become very foolproof and age proof and, dummy proof, whatever you want to call it, right? Grandma and grandpa can take fantastic photos of just about anything, because all they have to do is point their iPhone at it and tap the button, right? So, that as that technology has advanced, it has certainly made a big impact and lowered the skill and talent bar, and really enabled self-inspection to be as successful as it has.
Oh, nice. Okay, you mentioned a couple of things there. The first thing when you said that people are showing up in mirrors in their bathrooms is I'm thinking, please don't do the inspection after you got out of the shower and get dressed first. Clean your toilets before you take the pictures.
Yep.
But you mentioned the steel braided water lines. What are some other things that inspectors or that underwriters are looking for in these self-inspections?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of different things. I mean, it's like, where do you want to start, right? Generally speaking, when we're talking about residential properties, they start by taking a handful of exterior photos around the home, right? So we want a photo of the front of the house, the left side of the house, the right side of the house, the rear of the house. And then we want a photo of the yard on each side, right? The front yard, the backyard, etc. And so, inspectors are looking for, number one, they have a list of potential liability hazards that might be on that property, right? And so we've already talked about a couple of them. Are there handrails, right, on steps? Is there a porch at the front of the house, an elevated porch?
Is there a handrail on one step?
On one step, yes. So other trip and fall hazards, right? Is the sidewalk cracking and buckling and lifting and, causing an obvious trip and fall hazard? So those types of things, is there a pool on the property? If there is a pool, is there a slide or a diving board? Is there a trampoline, right? All of these types of kind of the most common liability hazards that ultimately have a higher likelihood of causing a personal injury, that can ultimately turn into a claim. So those are the first category, is these most common liability hazards. Beyond that, they certainly are looking for what might be referred to as moral hazards, right? Like, what is the overall general upkeep of this property? Does has the landscaping been completely neglected for months on end, right?
Wait a second. Neglecting your landscape is considered a moral hazard? I have a moral obligation to trim my bushes?
I think it is indicative of a potential deficiency in pride of ownership, right?
Ow!
And if I'm not taking care of my yard, then what else on my home am I not taking care of, right? Is there a lack of maintenance of the mechanical systems
bushes,
in my home?
I got no control over the living things outside my
house. So that's kind of the lens, right, that underwriters are working from. So those are kind of some of the basic liability hazards outside, and then they're looking at the structure itself, right? We're looking at the house and determining, is there any pre-existing damage, right, on that house? So are there missing shingles on the roof that could potentially cause water intrusion the next time it rains? And guess what? Now we have a big water damage claim inside the house, right? She's raising her hand.
Trying to get better about not interrupting, and I feel like I've interrupted you a lot.
No, you're fine. But again, work from the top, look at the roof, and work your way down. Are there cracked or broken windows, right? Are there, is there damaged siding, missing siding, dry rot on the siding, fascia around the windows, right? All those types of things, that ultimately could turn into a claim. And that's what underwriters are looking at, from an exterior perspective. And then just real quickly, right, then you move inside the home. You're looking for a lot of those same types of things, right? Is there any evidence of, water stains on the ceilings, right? That maybe
don't look in the hallway where my dog chewed up the wall.
There you go, right?
May or
and
may
certainly
not be repaired.
Yeah, certainly today, and I know that this would resonate with anyone who's writing personal lines business today, but there is more attention than ever now on all the mechanical systems in a home, right? So as we were talking about, right, like the plumbing system in the home, because we have seen industry-wide a very large proliferation of what they call non-weather water losses, right? In other words, water inside the home coming from the water supply, whether that is, a leaky, toilet water supply line, right? Or supply lines to the sinks in the home.
Or too much toilet paper down the toilet.
Or, all of those things,
if
right?
You got kids, man.
Yep.
Kids are considered the risk in terms of non-weather water losses.
There's definitely an added risk factor there, right? Water heaters are a huge area of concern, right? Because it's one of those things that a lot of homeowners just take for granted, and we don't do the maintenance on them that we should, and we don't replace them when they've reached the end of their lifespan, and you don't know that it needs replacing until it breaks and floods wherever it is, right? So
so through all of these things that companies are looking for and that people can take pictures and send them in and all, I've got a couple of different questions and not enough time to ask them. First question is, what's the propensity of doctored photos from individuals?
I'll be honest with you, when we first built our self-inspection platform 6 years ago, that was a very, very big concern for me personally. I thought, because when you're thinking about self-inspection and you're thinking about the idea of, okay, we no longer have a disinterested third-party inspector, right, who has no motivation one way or the other, right? They're just there to observe and report, right?
No,
and
listen, some of those inspectors come with some moods.
But that mind shift from an underwriting perspective and saying, okay, now we're placing the responsibility of the inspection onto someone who certainly would have much more motivation, right? To your point, to try to manipulate photos in some way.
Area to the other.
Exactly. Move the trampoline from the backyard, take the photo, and then put it right back where it was,
got a
right?
Big patch of dead grass where the trampoline used to be. It's fine.
And we've seen that. Yeah, we've seen that before. But what has been really fascinating to see, because we have gathered so much data now through self-inspection, and because we, right, for 20 years, we've been doing field inspections, right? So we have an immense amount of data on field inspections. And so now at scale with both field inspection and self-inspection, we can compare the data against each other and start to draw some really cool insights from that. And that has been fascinating for us. But what has been proven out by those comparisons is a bunch of different things. But to get back to your question, does self-inspection introduce the opportunity for a policyholder to take advantage, right, and game the system and try to strategically take photos? Yes, right? And anyone that tells you that self-inspection does not provide that opportunity is blowing smoke, right? There's no getting away from that. However...
and now with AI, oh my God. Like, I was just thinking the simple paint tool on...
Yes, and you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. And I published a video about this a month or so ago and talked at length about this. But what the data has proven to us is that it's not happening with any kind of frequency.
People are generally honest is what you're trying to say. Generally. I didn't say always.
No, I don't like to use the word honest, because the reality of what is happening is people are extremely naive and they do not understand what underwriting is. They don't know enough to even...
To know what to doctor.
Or what insurance carriers are concerned about, right?
I see. So it's like you don't know what questions to ask when you don't know what questions to ask. When you're taking photos, you're not exactly sure what the underwriter is looking for, so you're not sure.
And here's the underlying data that has proven this out. Well, I will say this, right? Like on the AI front, we're certainly using AI. It's funny, right? We're using AI to combat AI, right? AI. So there are tools out there, right? Computer vision and otherwise, that can analyze a photo and tell you whether or not it has been doctored in any way, shape, or form, right? In terms of digitally manipulating a photo. And you alluded to it earlier, right? But the skill level required to accomplish that has gone to zero now, especially with the latest smartphones, right? If you have the latest Google Pixel or the latest iPhone, you can snap a photo, right? And then literally tap on an object in the photo and it will erase it from the photo, right? We've probably all seen the commercials and yeah, exactly, right? And so
you just agreed I had a double chin. You were supposed to say no. Like, you just fell right into that crap.
Well played. But again, do I have a trampoline? No. Take a photo of it, tap the trampoline, boom, it's gone, right? Like it never existed. So
I've already forgotten my second question, but another question popped into my head. Are you a homeowner?
yes.
Name one thing that needs to be repaired in your home right now.
Yeah, I do. I have a missing piece of fascia on the east side of my house that that absolutely needs to be. And although I will say that I switched my homeowner's insurance carrier, I think probably 2 years ago.
Did you disclose it on your app?
I did not disclose. I don't think they asked about it specifically, but they did send an inspector to the house. I actually met the inspector. We had a fabulous conversation.
And you had little inspector nerdy conversations.
We did. We had an extremely nerdy conversation. And I didn't say anything to him about it, and he didn't take a photo of it or even mention it. So I thought that was interesting.
Bro. I got you. We
Exactly.
Just won't ignore this side of the house. I love it. All right. Off the property inspection side, I have one question about loss ratio.
Oh boy. All right. Let's do it.
Are you ever jealous of him?
Am I ever jealous? I mean, yeah, I would say so from time to time.
You have two very distinct personas. There is Curtis and the genuineness that you are, and then there's loss ratio. So I'm just wondering if you're ever jealous of loss ratio.
Yeah, I am fairly jealous. He gets all the attention. People love him, and I'm just the boring old inspection guy, right? Like, what is more boring than personal lines underwriting inspections? So yeah, there's definitely a little bit of jealousy there. I can't deny that.
Oh, how do you deal with it? You put him in a box, shove him in the corner. Nobody puts baby in a corner, by the way. I
do. Every once in a while, I take the chains and the hat, and I do have to put him in his place from time to time. But
nice. I kind of feel like we need a video about Curtis taking over loss ratio and just being like, dude, back off. I got this.
You know what? That is actually a really, really good idea. I might have to pay you for that one.
That's okay. I'll watch it though. Curtis, it really has been a pleasure getting to know you and pick your brain. You did bring it to the table today, so thanks so much for that. You are just a really unique individual, so I'm really happy that I've had a chance to meet you and experience what you do out in the wild as well as kind of in a box here on the podcast. So thanks so much.
This has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for the invite, and we should do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Bye, Curdle. That's where my brain jumps ahead of everything that's going on inside. Bye, Curtis. Toodles, everybody.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For more content like this, visit our website or join our online community. Interact with fellow peers, become a mentor, celebrate successes, and let's learn together. Visit our website and click on the community icon to get started. Thanks for watching.